Good evening. The time is now 6:31. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you would all please join me in stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Begin with the roll call. Tom Sinkowitz. Here. Myself, Don Fadella. Here. Linda Fedor. Here. Ted Demain. Adrian Ferraro. Here. Okay. In the absence of two of our regular members, I'd like to extend voting rights for the evening to Linda Fedor. Do you accept?
Yes.
Our first order of business is the review of the minutes from the last meeting. There is one correction that I would like to make, or at least get a clarification on the back page 6, where it says, Gary asked for the funds to go after police vehicles that have been traded out or auctioned off. There's a little confusion as to who asked that question, whether it was Don or Gary. Don, fairly certain it was yourself? Okay. All right. Are there any other questions or corrections that need to be made on this minutes from last week? If not, then I will entertain a motion that we approve these minutes from last week. Do I have a motion for that?
I move.
All right.
Change, I guess.
Don has a motion that we accept the minutes from last week with the change on page 6. Adrian has seconded it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? One abstention. Motion carries. We have basically one item on the agenda tonight, and that is the presentation of the budget by the Plainfield Board of Education. So at this time, I would like to introduce and welcome to the mic our Superintendent, Paul Brenton. And you may raise that if you'd like.
I actually may pick it up off of it. I just want to start my timer. I made a promise to my team that I would time myself and not go over. So I want to honor your time and the public's time by making sure I'm watching my time. Thank you to all the members of the Board of Finance for having the Board of Education here tonight. I've shaped my presentation based on questions your members have sent me. I'm going to speak to the budget development process, and then as I'm going through, I have specific slides that talk to specific questions I was sent. This budget's based around a variety of items. One of the first items it's based around is the implementation of new mandated state curriculum. If you're a member of the community, you are aware Plainfield is one of the districts in the state of Connecticut that has adopted and is running one of the state's approved curriculums for reading. That is New Wonders curriculum that was brought in this year. We do not need to apply for a waiver, as many other communities around us are doing. However, that curriculum cost is built into the budget. We're also running new curriculum that meets state standards in mathematics, study sync at the middle school, and building curriculum around the new Connecticut C3 frameworks in social studies. So the state continues to mandate. We as your school system continue to ensure we're meeting the state mandates when it comes to instruction. The second piece you're going to see in the budget is that we're maintaining our programs that the community is most excited about, specifically those programs that families are choosing between magnet schools and our schools are talking to us about. We have a partnership with New England Science and Salem. We have a partnership with Yale. If you've seen the articles in the Norwich Bulletin, we are the first district in the state of Connecticut running high school curriculum on AI. We're also on the computer dashboard, the high school that has the most computer science classrooms of any high school our size. We're working within our next generation science standards at our middle school, and we're maintaining our commitment to makerspace, which we have great support in the community from organizations like Westminster Tool, who makes annual donations to that program. You'll also note that we have a commitment to safety and security in this budget. In this budget is security personnel that were added this year. We spoke about it at the Board of Ed. They were requests of families. There are 2 security guards that are in this budget. They've been with us all year. We also have the elements. One question the Board of Finance asked me is, what is the Raptor system? The Raptor system is that system to the left there, which is at every one of our schools. An individual enters our school, their driver's license is scanned. This is scanned against a background check. A badge is printed, and we're ensuring that anyone who comes into our school during the day is safe to be around our students. These are all part of the safety and security measures that we've added into the budget, including, as you notice in the upper corner and you'll see in the insurance section, we've added funds to have cyber insurance next year. I don't think I need to tell anyone how important cyber insurance is. We have a commitment to our student activities, maintaining our sports, maintaining our clubs, maintaining our local partnerships. The bee presentation at the elementary school is one of my favorite presentations. I didn't realize how many types of honey we had in Plainfield, and that the honey is different colors at different times of the year. But any one of our students can now tell you. And we're maintaining a commitment to parent engagement, making sure we can do things like the movie nights at Moosup. If you don't have young children and you've never been around Moosup at Halloween, it truly is one of the most wonderful things in any community. And maintaining our commitment to the food bank and the other things that our students have done so much to do. When we take a look at the budget trends, our Board of Education is presenting a 3.62% increase. This is a $37,694,009 budget. When we take a look at where we have gotten to that number, I'm going to walk you through the initial numbers and the cuts that were already made by the budget. When we came into the budget, we have now at this time made 5 different sets of cuts. Our starting point for this year was a $2,315,000 increase over last year. What made that up? Largely fixed charges. $986,000 of that would have been the negotiated contracts if all positions were maintained next year. Out of district tuition increases are $415,000 for next year. I'll say that again. We have an increase in tuition for students who live in Plainfield that are going other places of over $400,000 in next year's budget. Transportation increase is at $366,000 with an anticipated fuel increase of $115,000. So when we look at those initial increases, the first budget that was presented, maintaining all programs, making no eliminations of programs, replicating this year, would have been an increase of $2,315,000. In our first set of cuts, we took a look at submissions with transportation adjustments, utilizing ARP-ESSER to make sure we can do that. We still have the ability for one more year to utilize that ARP-ESSER offset. And we made adjustments working with our insurance carrier to make those initial cuts. And then as superintendent, I worked with principals and made cuts. In those first series of cuts, there are 7 positions eliminated in next year's budget. Those are 7 positions currently in Plainfield schools that will not exist next year. 2 of them are full-time educators that were funded by our ARP-ESSER. These are classroom reduction teachers that were added to the elementary schools so that there were less students in class. During ESSER, there was a desire to try to have class sizes around 15, 16. 2 positions are being eliminated. In addition to that, 2 other full-time teachers, which are currently in open positions, will not be filled. Currently, both of those positions are in our pupil services budget, so if you do a line-by-line comparison in our pupil services budget, you'll see that we've reduced it by 2 positions. Ultimately, when we finalize our budget based on retirements, that may shift if needed, but that's where those positions exist right now. And then on top of that, we've cut 3 instructional support interns. Those interns are positions that we have had for several years with Sacred Heart. Those interns come into our district, however we pay them to be there. This is driven both by availability of candidates and trying to balance the budget and balance the personnel needs. In addition to those 7, there are 3 other positions that were in the local budget that are no longer in the local budget to help us maintain a budget that we felt we could present to the town. 2 of those are full-time educators that were in the ESSER grants that we've shifted to Title I because we don't want to have a giant budget cliff like you read about in the news. If you read about in the news, there are communities that are south of us coming in with millions of dollars of deficit because they're not making staffing adjustments to their staff. We've made those 2 by shifting them into Title I. I moved 1 staff member who's currently at one of our programs and anticipating possible class size reductions for a year from now. So we are pre-planning 1 reduction in staff for the 24-25 budget and building that piece. In addition to that, as I said before, we've offset in transportation and grants $250,000 with ESSER. I would remind the community we are on a 5-year contract for transportation. We're in year 2 of a 5-year contract. That contract with DACO has a minimum number of buses and a pre-negotiated increase. So that is a very fixed cost for us. When we take a look at our fixed costs and our resources, you'll notice that the largest increases in next year's budget are transportation and tuitions. Transportation makes up 90% of our budgets. Tuition makes up 7% of our budgets. Salaries and benefits make up almost 75% of those budgets in the pie. Purchase services and purchase supplies only make up 8% of our budget, with 3% of our budget in utilities. So we've already tried to be fiscally responsible, have made reductions to staff to bring in a budget that we felt that the town would show that we're being responsible. And you'll note that when we look at the areas where we have flexibility, most of our budget is fixed. We look at efficiency of operations. I've provided for every member of the Board of Finance where other school systems in the region have come in with their budgets this year. I've also provided those in the back for anyone who's here in the audience. Those numbers are current as of this morning, meaning that we went through and double-checked those numbers. You'll see that presenting a budget of 3.62 actually puts our Board of Education as one of the lowest budgets being presented to a town in Eastern Connecticut, in our Durgar, in our region. We know that regionally, just north of us, towns have approved 4.9%. And when we look at inflation being at 6%, that's actually not an unreasonable request. Inflation was 6.8 last month, it's 6.3 this month. It's coming down. However, we are still seeing a 7.5% increase in our software and a 5% increase in almost all of our tuitions for next year. These are fixed costs that have already been set. We look at efficiency of operations. This number is a Connecticut State Department measure, which is an NCE number. This is net current expenditures. It excludes transportation and a few other items and sets your per pupil expenditures. You'll see as a school district, not just in Eastern Connecticut, but throughout all of Connecticut, Plainfield has one of the lowest per pupil expenditures. That means that we are getting some of the most for our students out of our dollars. The towns of Concord, Sterling, and Brooklyn are the only towns regionally that have a lower per pupil expenditure. I would note that none of those towns have high schools. I'm running a high school which is a larger space and has more transportation and has award-winning programs like our music and theater department, which just did Chicago, is something that demonstrates a community commitment to the students. However, it also raises that per pupil expenditure. The next closest on that list is Killingly, and their per pupil expenditure is $500 more per student. And again, when we take a look at by comparison, obviously Hampton and Scotland and some other districts, they're smaller. We benefit on economy of scale. However, we are getting a lot for our educational dollars. We are not wasting money in Plainfield schools. This year marks yet one more year where poverty has increased in the community of Plainfield. I'd like to talk about how striking this number is for a second. Our free and reduced lunch number, the number of students in our town who qualify for free or reduced lunch. This means that their family, based on the number of students, meets a federal guideline, has increased from 26% in 2009 to 58% in 2023. The reason why this number is so amazing is that in the past 2 years, all students have gotten free lunch. What that means is that the motivation for a family to actually turn in this paperwork has been lower than any previous year. So while we've grown from 57% or 57.5% to 58%, we actually know that there are more families in the community that qualify for free and reduced lunch. They just didn't turn in the paperwork to qualify because they didn't need to. They were getting free lunch from the state anyway. That free lunch program actually is slated to end at the end of this year, unless the legislation makes a decision to vote and continue. When we look at additional budget drivers, there are a lot of places where we as a district sat down and said, these are places where we ourselves need to make cuts so we can bring a reasonable budget in. We made reductions in health insurance, working with our USI and Cigna consultants. We made reductions in our purchased pupil services. I'll walk through heat energy substitutes, but even places like textbooks and rentals and communications. Anywhere where we could find a place to save money, we pulled those pieces together. Because I knew there were people sitting at that table who were going to come back at me and say, I found a place you can save $500, so I tried to save it for you. When we look at our budget drivers, these are the 10 items on our budget that are our highest increases. Everything that is green there is fixed. You'll notice that I've reduced our salaries to an increase of $780,000. Our tuitions are going to go up by $415,000. That's a fixed number we can't change. Our non-certified employee salary is going up by about $239,000. We still have one contract left to negotiate, but we're pretty comfortable with where we believe those numbers will come. And transportation and fuel is going to come in high. That's even with the offset. When we take a look at each one of these individually, you'll see that we've worked pretty hard to keep our salary flat. I will note that our teachers are still among the lowest paid in Windham County, even with their new contract. And the second lowest paid actually got a higher contract. So we're still seeing staff turnover due to teacher salaries. When we take a look at all of those salaries, note that athletic salaries, non-certified salaries, these are negotiated. This increase does not include positions included in grants, and I've tried to reduce the number of positions included in grants because, as I say at every one of these meetings, the RBESR is going away at the end of next year, and we have to be fiscally responsible and prepared for that. And we know that the offsets I've used for the last 2 years in transportation, next year will be the last year that I have that offset available. We take a look at the students accessing outside programs. This is driven by two things. One of them is the average out-of-district tuition increase of 5% when we take a look at what we see our outside groups doing. We're also seeing a high number of students who are being recruited by the technical schools, a high number of students being recruited by VOAG. That number's gone up to 35. That number was, if you go back about 4 years, 20. And we're seeing students start to access new programs. QB Middle College at EastCon is a growing program, particularly for students who live in the Waukegan area. We're seeing more families who are looking to go to Charles H. Barrow STEM, which is recruiting very hard, which is one of the reasons why we brought in New England Science and Sailing and are focusing so hard on our makerspace. This increase, we believe, is pretty spot on based on the number of students who are telling us that they're choosing to opt for a magnet or another tuition outside of the district. We do have 185 high school age students attending tech schools. We send one bus down to Norwich Tech, and we send several buses up to Ellis Tech, which historically we've done. We've always had a long-standing partnership with Ellis Tech. When we take a look on gasoline and fuel, I'm very fortunate to have Mr. Richards, who's outstanding at predicting rates. And Kelly will tell you he watches rates almost a weekly basis. So we feel pretty comfortable that that $115,000 is going to accurately reflect what it's going to cost us to fill our buses and other vehicles next year, in addition to where we currently are. When we take a look at the gas and electricity, I had a couple members of the Board of Finance asking some questions, say, why is this up, why is this down, how can you be predicting less for solar or less for electric in a couple locations? So let's talk a little bit about what this is. Our fiscal budget estimates an 8% increase in usage. We're actually projecting that right now in our timeline. We're assuming a 20% increase in electrical costs and a 9% decrease in natural gas. So we are assuming that increase. However, we've been paying off for several years solar loans for Shepherd Hill, and we've been paying off for several years solar loans for Noosa. Solar loans for Shepherd Hill will be paid off in July. Those loans are not in next year's budget. So when you see a reduction in cost in Shepherd Hill, that's reflected in that budget there. In July, Noosa will no longer be paying for those solar panels, and that's 9 months that's 9 more months beyond the cost of Shepherd Hill, and after that, we're no longer paying for those solar panels, but we're getting the savings. So when you invest in those things, eventually they pay off. Next year is going to be year one of those projects paying off, hopefully paying off for several more years. We take a look at driver transportation. This includes the following different things. Understand that in addition to having a contract with DACO, we also contract with EastCon for some of our routes. This is because some of the routes are partnered with other districts. If we have students that are heading down to a magnet school south, we may partner with EastCon and split that cost with Sterling or another district north of us. This includes our DACO rates, and this includes our anticipated summer programming costs. You'll note transportation went down. This is one of my favorite graphs that I presented to you. Our transportation rates were headed up. Transportation plus fuel was at $3.4 million just a few years back. That's not just the buses, that's our gas. And then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, suddenly we had no fuel costs because we weren't running the buses. Schools were closed. The buses were closed. During COVID was when the bus driver's contract and the bus company's contract was renegotiated, and all of the bus companies fixed those pieces so that you're locked into a minimum cost, minimum number of runs, because they couldn't operate in what the 2020, 2021 numbers were. When you see that dip, and it looks as though we're going up, and you're saying, wow, $3 billion next year just in transportation alone, why is that going up? Understand we're actually much closer in real cost to that 3.4, because we are offsetting the climb of that using ARP ESSER funds, which we are allowed to do. And we've been very careful to manage those ARP ESSER funds so that they're not all expended. Locales will tell you they don't have ARP ESSER funds remaining for fiscal year 24. We've budgeted them so that we could slowly wean off the positions that were part of it and continue to support transportation. This year we utilized them to help pay for higher cost of substitutes. And finally, you'll note that within the budget we are still tackling capital improvement projects. You'll note I've highlighted here fiscal year 25-26, and when you go through your budget, you'll see that there are a lot of projects moved to 25-26. I'd like to remind the Board of Finance and the community that the high school bond is coming off at that time, and we have put out an RFP for a facilities study. That RFP is posted for the town right now. It's also on our website, where we're looking for outside individuals that come in, organizations, to look at all of our facilities, make recommendations based on space. They're going to be looking at the HVAC study, and we will be looking to tackle many of those projects, which are now in the yellow. Roofs, electrical upgrades, those HVAC projects families talk to me about regularly, all during, as a response to our facilities study. We're looking at space, we're looking at which buildings are the most efficient to heat, which buildings have been the best maintained. The high school is a 2006 building. It's our nicest and newest building. Shepherd Hill, which is a beautiful building as well, is much older, even though it doesn't look so. Moosup is the oldest building we have currently running. Moosup was Connecticut's first all-electric school, for those who don't know. The Early Childhood Center, which is across from Agway, was primarily redone in 2020. And when you look at roofs and facilities and HVAC and other pieces, that building is in very good shape. And actually, Mr. Richards and our other team are looking at our vehicle replacement cycle, which is part of the capital improvement. We did, during COVID, demand to purchase a truck. We do have another one slated for replacement. However, at this time, we don't think it's fiscally responsible purchasing another vehicle. So we're holding on that at this time. So, again, the budget in which we're presenting is a 3.62% increase. And I had a question asked to me of one of the members of the Board of Finance previously that had asked me to adjust it for giving credit to $350,000 of ECS last year. It was asked in the last meeting. And in an email today, because of that budget piece and the budget on the website, I note that after increased revenue, it's about a 2.1% increase. If you credit the three, we're anticipating to get over $375,000 more in ECS this year, and that number is confirmed. But if you credit $350 to last year, it comes in at 2.99. I think it actually comes in at 2.998, so almost 3%. When I told you in the last meeting I thought it would be under 3, I'm technically right, but 2.998, we're going to call that 3. So I'm happy to speak to any of the programs, any of the things that are done. And I would like to thank the Board of Ed for their support, and please note that the team worked very hard to try to bring a fiscally responsible budget to you.
Out of the budgets that you said were out of this morning, have any of them passed, or this was their proposal?
No, several of them have passed. I was able to pull those pieces. So how can I pull that information? I can pull that information from the board meeting minutes. However, there are many towns in different cycles. You'll see there's actually 2 towns where their Board of Ed is presenting either tonight or tomorrow. So their board hasn't approved a number. But I can tell you that we're looking at a lot of places passing at around 4%.
Do you know what is the capacity rate that we have at the schools right now?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like how full are they? Do we have room for more growth in there?
So I think that's a dangerous question, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
When the state does a capacity rate, the state will take every single room and they'll assign a number of students to it. So for a school like the Early Childhood Center, in which we operate 8 classrooms in a cafeteria, the state will tell you the Early Childhood Center is 21 classrooms. And then they'll take 20 kids and put them in each one of those classrooms. Now, it was never built to have 21 classrooms. It had the central office on it for some time since it moved out of cubicles. But presently, if you were to say how many students are within that space, we're running pre-K classrooms of 18 to 20 out of 4 different classrooms. We're hoping to increase that next year. But to the state, if you say 20 classrooms at 20 kids to a classroom, they're going to tell you that our building, the ECC, is slated for 400 students or 406 students. And they're going to tell you that if we have 125 students, we're running at 1/4 capacity. The reason why we're putting out the RFP is so that we can have the community make decisions on just this piece. I'm often asked the question, Paul, can you close an area, can you close a facility, could you move out of the ECC? The answer is really no. And the answer is we couldn't do that without actually going through for next year, making sure that we have spaces identified, and once we've involved the community members in that process, have those conversations. Today there's a meeting of Mission Musa. In fact, I believe the first selectman's at that meeting. That's about individuals in the community of Plainfield who are trying to reestablish the villages, build strength to the villages. A big part of the strength of those villages is the schools in those communities. And when we talk about a report about space like that, my speculation is that the state would say that our facilities, based on the facility themselves, are somewhere between 60% capacity at a place like the high school. They would probably say our ECC is under 30% capacity. They would probably say that Musa Memorial School are actually at capacity. And PCMS, if you take a look at that, they would take every classroom. But remember, they're also taking the special ed self-contained classroom that we've designated as a special ed self-contained classroom. You may only have 6 students in that classroom, and they're going to tell you you're not at capacity if you don't put 20 students in that room. The challenge with that number is that if we put 20 students in that room and we outplace those students, each of those students is going to be outplaced to the cost of $700,000. 10 outplaced students at $70,000 is that. So the state number is generated by a computer. It's not generated by a person, and we don't have a say in that. But I would speculate if you're looking at a report on capacity, building by building, you'd see high capacity at Memorial and at Musa. But in fact, I know the capacity number had to be done at Memorial to get the funds after the fire. And Shepherd Hill, Shepherd Hill has 5 classrooms right now dedicated to special ed programming, self-contained autistic programming. That's going to push it below level. I'm certain that our offices in the ECC push that below level. And our high school has approximately, well, I can pull the exact number of students there, but our high school is built to the capacity of 800, and it's not at 800. So all of those numbers will impact capacity. But to go even further on your question, I think that's why we need a facility study. So we can make decisions, because if you looked at our HVAC study talked about things as inexpensive as $200,000 or $250,000 to upgrade facilities at the Early Childhood Center, and projects over $1 million in some of our older buildings. So as we look forward, as we think fiscally responsibly in 10 years, I think those are conversations that the Board of Education needs to have with the community, and I think having informed information will help us.
Thank you.
Anyone who's watching, that facility study is available on the state DAS page or on our website.
I have a question on the regional cost comparisons. You have Plainfield listed as a daily membership of $2,009.4. What is inclusive in that number?
You're looking at this right here.
Yes.
So the state pulls that, so these numbers are 21, 22. That number came specifically from, so our system, our Aspen system, kicks out numbers to the state. They kick them out twice a year, once in October, and then once again in December. We actually do a March 1 count, but I don't think it's part of that number. So that's active students enrolled at that time. And those numbers are based on what those memberships are. So this is 2020, 2021 average daily membership against 2021, 2022 net expenditures. And I actually didn't make this chart. I pulled this chart directly off the State Department website in case anyone questioned my numbers.
Well, I guess I'm looking at that number, and then I'm looking at the enrollment number for the same year, and the enrollment number is less.
So remember that the enrollment number too takes into account a couple different pieces. And I try to be very transparent in my enrollment number on where we are with pre-K and other pieces. We have had, this year we've had a real challenge enrolling pre-K because at the start of the year we didn't have enough teachers to run all the pre-K classrooms. So when you don't have a pre-K classroom available in September or August, families find other childcare. We actually have a wait list right now. We are actually looking based on the fact that we've added additional staff to be adding more seats, and we are bringing those people in. So we're going to have other individuals who are actually joining our program from March to June, families that couldn't access it before. Those numbers include all of those students that are coming in and out, and they have those pieces. Our largest fluctuations, though, are pre-K. And our pre-K staff is one of our smallest staffs if you go through the budget of the ECC. There is an increase in the pre-K staff because you'll note, as I note in the budget, prior to my arrival, one of the pre-K teachers was placed into our classroom for the 2021-2022 year. The pre-K program is very important to myself. It's very important to our board, getting students enrolled in early literacy, so we have restored that teacher to our regular budget. Trying to, again, avoid a cliff. Which is why I think if you look at the school by school, and you see most schools are at about a 3 to 5% increase, the ECC is at a 13% increase, that's entirely that one teacher we've added.
Is that, on the ECC, you're talking about it, that's these two pots, people here, there's two of them.
Do you mind if I approach and take a look?
Yeah.
Yes, so what you're seeing here is this line 970, is there's a 0 for salary on the 970 because of the previous budget. That individual was funded through Grant 970, which is American Rescue Plan testing.
School pension contribution, is that an increase in this proposed budget, or is it about the same as what we're in currently?
It was an increase last year. This is the same contribution as we had last year.
Which is the amount of...
So if we go through in two different pieces, the pension contribution, so it exists in a few different places. The pension contribution exists one place in the budget within support services where the paraprofessionals are. That pension contribution, there's about $100,000. And then there's another pension contribution in $300,000, and I'm going to look to my business manager, who can tell me, John will line up.
It's fixed 11, and the line number I think is 210. It's 210 or 230. I think 210 is helpful, so I'm going to go with 230. Final answer.
Thank you.
we've had open positions. And in 1 year, the salary rate for that position is one thing, but the position is still open, but they're bumping it up. I'm wondering if you can answer that, why that has taken place.
Well, so to be perfectly honest, when I looked at some of our open positions, I'm trying to be realistic in the budget. There was a time when the universities were graduating a lot of young teachers, and I was able to hire young teachers directly out of school. And we used to actually use Masters 3 in the contract as the number for an open position. Realistically speaking, we're not finding Masters 3 candidates, and we're not finding Masters 3 candidates who are getting higher rates other places. We've raised that to Masters 6. Our teacher's contract is actually fairly fixed. It doesn't allow the superintendent of schools a lot of leeway on providing additional rates for years or other pieces. However, we're finding other districts that do. The best example I can give of this is that we attempted to hire a young science teacher from Norwich. She spent a day at Plainfield Central Middle School. She said it was the best day she's ever had. She's a fourth-year teacher. She really badly wanted to come to Plainfield Central Middle School. We offered her fourth step, sixth year, which is what she had, and she had to turn us down because the district she's in is paying her at 11th step, because their district is saying that anyone in science, math, or technology instantly moves to top step. So one of the things I've had to do is I've had to adjust what we believe an open position is. Another thing that I didn't do in this budget, which if you look back for previous budgets you'll see, is I did not assume savings on retirements. If you go into last year's budget and the previous budget, we were making assumptions of savings on retirements. We were assuming if a teacher retired that we were going to instantly capture about $20,000 in savings on that retirement. We're not finding that to be the case in the job market. We're finding it to be a very competitive job market, particularly in areas like special education. You'll notice we still have open positions for SLP, school psychologists. Those are teachers' positions, and it's a very competitive market. I know at least one of you might be able to teach Spanish. That is a very competitive market if you can teach Spanish. So we're seeing other individuals in those places. So because of that, we bumped up some of those pieces, because I knew that if I told the town I could bring in someone at 45, I wasn't going to be able to do that. There is a memo that I attached as well, just to explain some other movements, if I can just speak to the three elements in the memo. The first element was $65,000 for summer school. We split that over two different places. That was last in. I hate to say it would be first out. That's ultimately for the Board of Education to decide. But that summer school program is particularly important to our community. In fact, I was just on the Plainfield residents 2 nights ago and had people talk about how badly they wanted to have summer programming, and the fact that some of the summer programming for the town is already filled up. Many people may not know that the town summer program is actually supported heavily by a grant that the schools sign off on. The schools have the opportunity to go after that acceleration grant. However, we sign off on that for the town because we would need to partner with someone. So a large part of that summer program, which Jordan Lumpkins does an excellent job writing that grant, if I can thank the town for the good work they do there to run that program, is a program that we partner with them on. The other two items on that list is from our January presentation. Mr. Wickard and I took a look at health insurance, made some adjustments in about $35,000 based on where we thought things may go with additional contract negotiations. And then in addition to that $35,000, we got our bill for our software for Frontline, which is what manages most of it, and it was a 7.5% increase across the board, which they can do when you're a captive audience, right? So we had to make those adjustments on that memo, and everything I've sent you, and the budget that's on our website demonstrates those adjustments. If you were to watch the January presentation, there's slight differences in just 5 of the numbers that I speak to because the board made those adjustments in our February board meeting. Our cyber insurance number is a projection. However, we are actively working on that, and I believe there were even meetings on that.
So I have a question regarding the Plainfield Central School. Now, I realize that you might not have the answer at your fingertips, but under instructional purchase professional services, there's an increase from last year of $54,000, and it seems to be to 2 items. I wonder if you could just speak to what they are. One says study sync, and the other one is textbook support materials.
I can speak to both of them. The person who can speak to them much better is, where do you go? Let me speak to both of them. Because Scott's curriculum is like Kaiser Soze. So Study Sync is the middle school language arts curriculum. We rolled out Wonders for all of the students in our pre-K through 5. It's the natural segment to bring the curriculum as part of that mandated state curriculum which supports the science of reading into our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade year, and that's the cost of that program. That program is both in person and online. It's connected to the 2 different pieces. It was something that was originally piloted during COVID, and the class that piloted it saw our greatest results. So we saw those pieces.
Is this an annual purchase?
It is an annual purchase. The second part of that, what we're looking at is, if I were to go back to this slide, one of the board's initiatives, and it's one that they've been working particularly hard on, is in the illustrative math or illustrative math, we're bringing Algebra 1 back into the middle school. And the reason why we're bringing Algebra 1 back into the 8th grade is we have a group of students who we know mathematically can tackle Algebra 1. It wasn't taught during COVID, hasn't been taught for the past few years. We have our top students, and I hesitate to say top because we have so many outstanding students, but we have our 8th graders who love math most, probably a better way to say that, are really pushing us, and families are really pushing us to say, can we get our students into Algebra 1 in 8th grade, have them actually tackle high school Algebra 1, so as sophomores they're in Algebra 2, then we're getting into our upper level calculuses and high-end math in our junior and senior year. We had a student last year go to Yale. That student tackled some high-end math on his own. We want to make sure that every student has the opportunity to tackle the high-end math, so that's what you're seeing in that other purchase, is the Algebra 1 textbooks coming to the middle
And
school.
that's a new annual purchase?
That will be annual.
No?
Hold on for 1 second. My expert is here. Mr. Sherman, do you want to talk to Algebra 1 purchase in the budget?
Sure. What was the specific question?
The specific question was, can we explain the textbook purchase in the middle school for math?
Oh, absolutely. So there's 2 factors that go into the textbook purchase. One is with the IM, introduction of the IM math, 6th through 8th grade, it's repurchasing of consumables. So things, workbooks that students are using throughout the year, you need to repurchase new ones for students. And then, as Mr. Brenton was talking about, we're expanding a Algebra 1 offering. It's through IM, the same course, but they have an Algebra 1 course. We're purchasing that course, textbooks, and the consumables for that for students at the middle school.
So the $33,000 is not going to be the same cost next year because you're only going to need to remove the consumables, is that correct?
That cost, after, when you make an initial textbook purchase, is typically higher because then going forward, you're not purchasing the teacher books, you're not teaching the hard books, you're basically just maintaining the consumables.
You know, when was the last time that we switched to any type of program like that, or?
So our middle school was using Envisions. Envisions is about 8 years old. The state has released new model math curriculum. They just released new model social studies, I believe, last week. So this is aligned, we will be aligned with state standards in mathematics, state standards in ELA at the middle school. We are completely aligned with the science of reading. There was only actually, out of the 129 or so districts in Connecticut, there was only 19 that were approved for the elementary reading program in the first round. I'm proud to say our team was one of that 19. And then the new C3 framework for social studies and the new standards are on the state website. It was just in the news last week, so we're doing that work to be up and prepared for that.
Under the PMS budget, there's under your health and nurse supplies, I wonder if we could just let me know what AED is.
Yes, so AEDs are defibrillator devices. AED stands for?
I don't know. I've always referred to them as AEDs.
AED is a defibrillator. That's in case someone were to have a heart attack. We are required to have them in buildings. And one of the changes that we've made in the last 2 years is that we did a survey of our buildings and discovered that we were meeting minimum standard. And what I meant by minimum standard of the AEDs was that in a building like Plainfield High School, we may have 1 or 2. If someone were truly to have an emergency, like a student, to have to go up a floor and down 2 hallways or to the main office may be very, very far. So we expanded the number of AEDs we have in district. We now have them in every building on every floor. However, every AED has a 3 to 5 year battery, and we have to pay to either have a new battery put in, to have them inspected, or to have them swapped off. So in our annual service for AEDs, individuals come through and check them all. We've actually seen some cost savings by going to one individual company for that. We're looking to do similar things with elevators and other pieces. It's something that Mr. Richards is particularly good at finding is cost savings through economy of scale. However, because we have more AEDs, the cost of AEDs has gone up because we have more annual batteries to replace. So we've gone from district-wide, I'm going to give a number and it's going to be wrong, but if we had 10 AEDs in the district before, we have 20 now.
You may have already answered this question, but as I look through this, and it may be on this information, but I've noticed in a number of cases, I have a 3-year average on line item from last year, and I have a 3-year cost average on the same line item for this coming year. And the 3-year average has decreased, but the monies allocated on that have increased.
So I think
one of them is that, and you may have already answered this, but I'd just like to be clear so I have a better understanding. Operation maintenance of plant purchase tech services.
which exactly?
Okay.
There's a lot of different
Moosup
sections.
Elementary, the 3-year average for this item, last year was $12,740. This year, the 3-year average is a little over $12,000, but you're budgeting $23,000.
So let's take a look. So I'd have to pull the exact line out and let me do it. If we're budgeting 23, it's because there's something in that wasn't in that before.
Okay.
I will say 2 different pieces on 3-year averages. It's long been the practice in Plainfield and continues to be for us to try to manage our budget internally and to make sometimes hard decisions when unexpected expenditures come. The best example I can give of this is at our middle school, we had 2 sinks fail at the start of this year. Those sinks are special sinks that are in the girls' restroom on both floors, and those sinks are each $13,000 a piece. So we're looking at $26,000 in sinks. Why are they $13,000? Because sinks in a girls' restroom had to fit a certain plumbing that was original to it, and they have to be ADA compliant. And we're not allowed to buy a new sink that's not ADA compliant. So we had to take $26,000 and purchase those sinks because we couldn't open school without them. We did not come to the town for $26,000. Instead, we looked through the entire budget and we reallocated the budget as we have for the past 3 years to try to be responsible and say, what hard decisions do we have to make? In this case, it was purchase of snow equipment and other things that got cut. So sometimes if you look at a 3-year average...
So that worked out in your favor?
What's that?
So that worked out in your favor this year? You used it out of the snow?
We used it. You know, when staff comes to you and tells you you need a piece of snow equipment, you're the superintendent, you just say yes. What are you gonna, am I gonna call parents and say, I'm sorry, we didn't open, in trouble? So we generally do those pieces, but that would be my caution on the 3-year average for some of those areas, is understanding this year right now, we're working to offset out-of-district tuitions. And we're making transfers to offset those out-of-district tuitions because that number, that increase of 400,000, we're starting to see this year. So if we take a look at this line, let's look at what's here, because a lot of these are fixed annual, right? So pesticide spray, Unitech alarm coming through is an annual, preventative care. The item that I'm seeing that seems to be the real difference here is how we are purchasing things like phonic gear. Sometimes that stuff gets purchased through our special ed grants. However, we are responsible in each and every school to make those purchases related to special needs students and where we have those. The number for this year, though, is actually predicted to be below what we budgeted last year. We lowered that in our request.
That's a little off topic. What is I believe it's called a Master's 3? No, Master's 30, right?
So Master's 30 is, okay, so it's a good question.
I'm trying to remember, what is Master's 30 step 1? Where do you start off on that?
What's our salary?
Yeah, where are we at?
Oh, I'd have to pull the contract up. I can't give you that number, and we have a new contract next year. So I can have someone do that behind me if you'd like me to. But we presented comparatives previously. But Master's 30, for those who don't know, is 30 credits over the Master's. And the contracts are on our website. Do we have Wi-Fi here, Scott? Because I was told
I'm pulling it up.
Okay. I'll get you that number in a second. And for those who don't know, all of our bargaining unit contracts are on our website for every employee in district. They're under staff union contracts, both our current active contracts and any upcoming contracts. So you can see the teacher's contract our teachers are currently operating under, and the contract that's been negotiated for the next 3 years starting in 23-24.
I have one here if you want to look at it and see if it's this right here.
Yeah, so Plainfield, actually with our contracts, we actually only have, so basically you have steps and you have scales, right? Plainfield has bachelor's, masters, and 6-year and PhD as our scales. So a master's step 3, did you say, or 4?
One, just one.
Oh, master's step 1 for 23-24 school year is $47,940.
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, here, sorry. No, because so all I wanted to say, because you made a comment earlier, is, so I actually, I'm not a Spanish teacher, I teach in Spanish. So I'm a 5th grade Spanish teacher in Wyndham. Sure. And one thing that I have seen is just that, because a master's step 1 here in Plainfield is $47,940, and automatically, you know, a couple towns over, it's $12,000 more to start off.
It's $12,000 more, and there's a bill right now on the state floor that would make the minimum pay for a starting teacher $62,000.
So, I mean, I say that because, I mean, even looking at that, I know that this is from, it's 59, I believe, 59 some change from last year, so 22, 23. And the other thing that I see with that is that I actually work with Plainfield residents in another town. You know, so looking at that, I'm just like, man, what are we doing? So when he was talking about the increase and why he did that, I can see that.
I appreciate you sharing that. You had it right there. Why didn't you just tell me?
He just handed it to me.
Oh, okay.
He just handed it to me.
I can tell you, we try to deliver a fiscally responsible budget. I myself have worked in Eastern Connecticut in the towns of Putnam and Killingly, now in Plainfield. I understand the community, I understand the needs. We're doing the best we can with the budget we have, and we've tried very hard to make the cuts that we thought made sense to put the town in a good position long term.
See a lot of places where, maybe you just answered the question. Like I'm looking at Plainfield High School right now, and you have student services here. You got $82,000 here, but a 3-year average, you only have $49,000.
I'm going to approach you, just kind of take a look and see what we're looking at here.
Yeah. Right there. 3-year average. And you got that number. You did the same thing over here too, last year.
So the section you're looking at there is where we're spending money along those items. There have been times, and I will be honest, and it's something parents have spoken to me about, where based on need at the high school's had a lot of rooftop units fail. One of the reasons our electrical bills are going up is because our rooftop units are being repaired. And suddenly we have all of our rooftop units running. I haven't done a unit by unit cost increase, but I can tell you Mr. Lucier, our previous business manager, was confident that every time I fully replaced a rooftop unit, our bills were going up. We've offset those in other areas. One of the things that parents have met with me on is asking me, please do not take money from things like athletic uniforms, other pieces that are important to our students, because those are items of pride for our students to make sure that they're not out there in older uniforms. But things have been deferred for the purpose of balancing the budget and making sure the building is in operation.
Question about Music Elementary. Last year we budgeted to replace 3 of the 2A radios, and we're budgeting to replace 3 more again this year.
So the elementary schools actually have a lot of two-way radios, and we budget them on cycle. I was always surprised by how expensive those two-way radios are. I think I'm in the wrong business.
My math could be off, right? But, so I'm seeing that normally there's just under a 1% increase year over year, what we're looking at. So just, you know, I know COVID and things like that went down a little bit, but, and then we're looking at 3.6%. So is that, I mean, is there, like, what changed so much?
Well, I would say that, well, let's talk about 2 different things. So historically, most communities are giving between 2.5% and 4% a year to their schools. If you look over the last decade and you combine everything on that sheet, and this is including last year's increase, over the last decade, we've had 8.5% total. We've had 8.5% at a time when we would need between 20 and 30% to maintain all the programs we've had. So year after year, we've had cuts. If you were to talk about things that exist in the budget 10 years ago, like crossing guards, they're not even on my budget these days, because those are items that have been cut in the past. So when we take a look at what we're doing for us to have the budget that would have maintained everything we had last year, and I started with that. So everything that has right now, any current contracts and other pieces, had I presented that, we're looking at a 6.36% increase. That's because tuitions are high, as I said. That's because contracts are high.
And that's not changing or adding anything?
That's not changing or adding anything. Well, let me take that back. That's adding the 2 security guards, because that's 2 staff that exist this year that don't do last year. But each one of those guards is under 30,000.
So, and I just want to make sure I understand you. So you're saying that keeping the budget the same, but adding security, which we know is important, right? You would be at 6.3. So then you went over it again since December 9th and just kept making different cuts from what you have this year.
Correct.
And you came up with 3.62%.
Correct.
But you're right, I wasn't that far off. I think that with going down in 18 and down in 2020, I was at, what, 8.3?
Sure.
So yeah, so it was, I think we was 8.3 since 15. So, I see that. I was just wondering how that changed. Thank you. And then it went up, sorry, it went up from 3.44. So it says public presentation was 3.44, and then it went up because you added some programming.
Correct.
And that's all that changed there.
That's, well, everything that's on that memo changed. So we added summer programming, and then in addition to the summer programming, we learned that our health insurance would probably be about $35,000 more, and we learned that
Thank you.
our software was going up significantly. So when we did that, one of the things we did was we moved, the largest thing we did was MooSup was cycled to get another set of Chromebooks. And we looked at those Chromebooks, we looked at their expiration. Chromebooks take a beating at the elementary level, but we pushed them off 1 year.
Just a little bit. I have 5th grade, really just slamming.
So we're looking at a good increase for the ECC next year in students.
So we're looking at a good increase in the ECC for 2 reasons. One of which is being fully staffed. We're going to be fully staffed for the school. The other thing is we know we have additional seats that are now available to us, so we're applying for those additional seats. We'll know when we get that grant approved. We'll actually know by the end of April. But we know that we will have the ability, we believe we'll have the ability to add as many as 40 seats, and those 40 seats are out there. Remember that if, for those who don't know in the community, we do have a Head Start program. That Head Start program is at MooSup Gardens. The Head Start program can provide programming for families with financial need year-round, and they have a nice space there at MooSup Gardens if you haven't seen it. Our pre-K program is a program that runs not in the summer, but it runs half-day along with the school year. And then we also are increasing some partnerships with our readiness program. Our Family Resource Center also runs out of the ECC. So we're increasing an entire classroom next year and offering at least 40 more slots.
They only run half days?
They run half days. Our pre-K is half day, our kindergarten is full day. So our pre-K students come for either morning session or afternoon session, and all of those staff actually work a longer day.
So you have about, so here it says you got 46 coming. So 46, 15 per class, half day, right?
Correct.
Is that all right? Okay.
So two half-day sections then?
Correct.
Not half-day period.
Correct. Adding 1 teacher gives us a morning and an afternoon session. And then we also have a special needs one, which some students are in that. I would say that getting students in pre-K, so let's talk about why getting extra students in pre-K is so important to me and so important to the community. First and foremost is in pre-K is where we do a lot of our screenings. In fact, we're doing pre-K screenings right now. There's a flyer on Plainfield residents if you're interested in pre-K screenings. And getting students involved allows us to get early interventions. It allows us to get reading supports. It also allows us to identify those students early who might be on the cusp of being special education. Now, generally speaking, we don't identify students in special education as low as pre-K. A lot of those identifications don't come until first, second, or third grade because we know reading gaps are so great at the lower level. But the earlier we can get a student in one of our schools with the book in their hand and sending home with the books in their backpack, the more students are going to have performing at level in first grade. And we know that the most important grade for reading is grade 3. That students make their greatest gaps, and if they're not reading on grade level in grade 3, we're going to have a harder job moving that student just based on the way the mind develops than if we get them there to grade 3. So we push heavy resources into pre-K, K, 1, 2, and 3.
Based on the projected enrollment for next year and what the enrollment was in 2019 to 2020, we've had an overall reduction of 10% in enrollment. Has that correlated with any type of staffing allotment?
Well, you can see the 7 staff that I've reduced just in this budget alone, and 3 that I've shifted. So I can speak to a significant staff reduction in this budget. I would have to go back to Mr. DePietro. This is only my second budget for the city of Plainfield, so I would have to go back to Mr. DePietro's budget. However, one thing I can say is that many staff that previously existed in the local budget were moved to grants, or those positions were eliminated.
Now, we know that the ESSER is going to run out. Is there something on the horizon that is going to be a replacement of ESSER, or do you foresee any potential for that? Because as you mentioned, for 2 years now, we're looking at a cliff and we need to be prepared for it.
I think this budget prepares us for the cliff. With some of the changes that we're making. We're not going to fully prepare for the cliff. When asked, do I see things on the horizon, I guess I would say this. There's several bills in Hartford. Bill 5003, if that bill goes through, that bill would have significant help for Plainfield schools for fiscal year 24-25. Because that bill has the state making major contributions to magnet tuition, which is one of our largest budget drivers. However, that bill has left the House and needs overall approval. But that's Bill 5003. I actually spoke in favor of it at the State House. Conversely, there is another bill which sets a minimum cost for a starting teacher. If the minimum cost for a starting teacher for all starting teachers in the state of Connecticut goes to 4 times poverty, which is what that bill proposes, which means it's either 58 or 62,000 based on what you're projecting, a 24-25 budget would see even more significant staff increases because as you look through your budget and see the number of people that are there. Do I think that's possible? I don't know, but I will say there is precedent in the state of Connecticut for a bill like that being passed. If you go back, the teachers union was able to successfully lobby and get a cost of living bill passed about 20 years ago, which did the same thing. It won't impact next year's budget.
Right. If a bill like that is passed, okay, and entry levels hypothetically become $62,000 a year, how does that impact the step-ups for those under existing contract? And I realize you can only guess and speculate, but do you see that as having a major
I
impact?
get in trouble when I guess on those things. So
But it would have a significant
Can I
impact
guess and you nod?
I get in trouble when I guess on those.
in the state house right now.
I don't know that I'm an expert who can speak to those. I know the bills I testified on. I'm sure there are many. So, but as far as things that impact us for next year, we know what our ECS number is. We're confident in that number. And we know that there is not a bill currently which is going to provide any additional alliance funds. So there will not be additional alliance funding.
On the note of us being District now. What is the long-term benefit as far as what we're going to be seeing in the future for now the fact that we are an Alliance District? I know we haven't been very long, but I know that question has come up as far as when's the town going to see the benefit of that?
Well, I think we saw the benefit this year in the adjustment in ECS, right? The adjustment in ECS went up over $370,000. Remember that there are certain things that Alliance grants are eligible, the Alliance districts are eligible for that other districts are not. So historically, Killingly, Thompson, Groton, Putnam, all of those districts have leveraged construction over the last decade using Alliance building grants. They've renovated parking lots, they've done those pieces. We're not eligible for Alliance building grants. So it's really a matter of what money the state sets aside and how they target that money, and us having the ability to apply for those pieces. If you were to look at projections on ECS, you're going to see that our ECS number is slated to be fixed based on the equation. So the number that we got this year, which was the increase of over $370,000, is not going to reduce, and we otherwise would have seen a reduction.
One other question on the memo, because I don't have the ability to do it in my head, but you have increases and then you have reductions. What's the net change on that?
That memo should even out. So those reductions should even, correct. I presented a memo that was off by $1 in our last meeting, so John and I are trying very hard not to do that again. I will be here again on the 19th. While schools are on vacation, I will be here next Wednesday when you're discussing. And if you have other questions that you'd like to send me in between, as I did before, I'll try to email responses to the entire Board of Finance. Our board will be meeting again, oh, I apologize, our board will be meeting on the 19th. This board will be meeting again next Wednesday. I'll be here next Wednesday.
All right. Are there any other questions? Comments from the board? Tom? Don?
I just come up with that right now.
Okay. At this point, I will entertain a motion that we accept the presentation from the superintendent. All right, we have Adrian making a motion that we accept the presentation. Do I have a second? Second. All right, Linda seconds. In the presentation, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that motion carries. Thank you for your time. At this time, I will open the floor up to any citizens' participation. If anybody has anything that they would like to ask the board or the superintendent, or there's a comment they would like to make, I would ask that you approach the mic and give your name and whether you are a resident of the town of Plainfield.
Good evening, Sean Peterson, Plainfield. I have a question about the Alliance District. What does that really give us? I mean, obviously, lots of ECS funding. What do we need to be able to do to be able to utilize some of the funding for buildings? Is that possible in the future? And is there any additional cost that we have to provide extra programs because we are an Alliance District? It's actually costing us more money.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. You come closer to the mic.
I was curious about the Alliance District.
Yep.
How we can, what it benefits us. Obviously, it locks that money, or increases it slightly. How do we get how can we become eligible for some of the building funding? And does it have more cost to the town to be the Alliance District? Do we have to provide extra programming for students? Is there anything there?
I'll let you speak to that.
Thank you, Sean. So let's talk about what Alliance designation is and where it comes from. The state of Connecticut designated over a decade ago. The earliest equations, I believe, are 2012 equations. Going back to 33 districts over a set size, which they identified as being districts of most need. Now, I'll say over a set size because understand that that N number, the number of students you have in your school, really designated that you have a high school. And if you didn't have a high school, if your school was underperforming, you didn't qualify for what they then at that time called the Alliance Shelter. When those initial Alliance grants came out in 2012, they were looking at your excess cost, a whole series of other factors. They looked at your poverty numbers, they looked at your enrollment. The original 33 districts were granted money in two forms. One was relief to the town in the form of education, or ECS. The other was a grant granted to the districts, the equation for which I don't know. That grant set money into 4 different categories: talent, academics, operation, and climate, and required districts spend money in those 4 areas. In 2017, that equation was revamped. And when we were granted, awarded Alliance status in 2021, just as I was arriving, the equation is based on 2017 numbers. So when they locked in that piece, that equation and Alliance status is set by legislation which has not changed. There's not a current bill on the floor for that legislation to change. We went to the Connecticut State House and spoke to trying to change that legislation, and many of our local representatives and legislators in the Plainfield community, both senators and representatives, met with the school, worked with us, but we were unsuccessful in making a change. For building funds to be available, within one of the budget bills, they would have to designate in the governor's budget funds that would then be designated to Alliance districts. Within earning a grant that would allow us to apply to talent, academic, climate, and operations, right now there's no funds designated for the new Alliance districts. So it's not just us. It's us, Thompson, Groton, I believe Enfield's on that list, have been awarded Alliance status. However, no additional funds outside of the 2017 equation for ECS are there, and they won't be there until legislation is changed. Understand that there are some very large districts that receive quite a bit of funds that are not motivated, even though they're no longer Alliance districts, to change that equation. So the only way it will change is for us as communities to lobby for it to change. And the way we would gain funds is through things being designated for Alliance in the governor's budget. I will say there is a ray of hope. And a ray of hope is that in several of the bills that are slated to actually impact 2024-2025, 5003 being one, there are different designations of how funds are received if you are an Alliance district. And if one of those bills comes through, we may see additional relief that non-Alliance districts do not see. However, there hasn't been significant change in Alliance legislation in the past few years.
Okay. And do they require us to provide any type of extra programming?
So we have an Alliance rep from the state of Connecticut who comes through, meets with us, looks at our plans, looks at our programming, and they have provided us access to some additional professional development. Other Alliance districts are provided to do a series of things as far as data tracking and things, which we do anyway. If we didn't do them, they would be required, but we've done them for the last 10 years. So we have not yet had an ask from the State Department of Ed, with the exception of some grant work that we've done, which Mr. Sugarman is more than happy to absorb.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to?
Art Gagney, Plainfield. I have 3 questions. On page 16 of the Plainfield High School, they have an increase in the monthly elevator expenses and inspections of a little over $2,000. There are 5 other schools that don't have this increase. Should they have an increase or this one shouldn't have an increase? All the rest of the schools are at the 4,070. And this one has an increase to 6,105.
So I can speak slightly to the elevator bills in that as elevators age, the cost of those inspections change. If that number changed, it was changed based on actuals, and sometimes we do those pieces. What I can do is I can pull the actuals and let the Board of Finance know what we're paying for elevator inspections.
Okay.
When I became a school leader, the cost of elevator inspections and fire system inspections was one of the great eye-openers for me.
And this is our newest school, correct?
It
Plainfield
is,
High
but
School?
remember, the elevator is aging. The elevator is going into being 20 years old now.
Okay. And all the other ones were replaced, or?
I can
'Cause
get you, I can get you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm assuming all the other ones are, they're older than the high school would be, unless they've been replaced.
I can
So.
get you the actuals on
Okay.
that. I wouldn't know if an elevator had been replaced prior to my arrival.
Okay. And the other question I had was, S-Vary is social work?
I will not speak to any individual staff.
Oh, I was just wondering is if they worked in two schools.
Yes, we have social workers that are split in multiple locations.
Okay, I saw the
and
name
we have
twice.
guidance counselors split in multiple locations.
Okay. And then on page 3 of the pupil personnel, the per instruct services at the top, there's an increase in TOD/HH, 27,000. I was just curious what that was. And also the specialized therapy under that for 4,200. Those two items.
TOD stands for Teacher of the Deaf and Hearing Impaired.
Okay.
So we have I can't speak to actual numbers of students, but that's an impact of, we have students in district that are deaf or hard of hearing, since that's eligibility under federal IDA law to provide services. And when those services some of those services require a teacher of the deaf. That in particular, I think it's either, because it's a small populace there, I believe that's us contracting that service to provide that. But the TOD that's the new increase for this teacher of the deaf.
That's a new item.
Yes.
Yes. And specialized therapy, 4,200 under that?
Oh, that is homebound services. It's also services that are extremely unique, such as students that might be wheelchair bound, students that have cochlear implants that require specialized service that is kind of unique and beyond that we would provide that service in district. Again, it's hard for me to talk to it because the numbers are so small, and if I talk to specifics, I can't inadvertently identify a student.
Yeah.
But
No. I'm just asking because it's a new item.
yeah, teacher of the deaf and specialized are specific to very unique services that have entered our district, wheelchair-bound, cochlear implant type of services.
And then the other question I had was on page 9 of pupil personnel. On the top, East Con. And it says there's a 3% rate increase. If I'm doing the math right, that's a 20% increase.
Yeah, so again, from my memory serves me correctly, and again, I'm in a slightly different capacity this year, but my memory serves me correctly, even though that the number of students is the same, the required services of, I believe, a couple of those students are different. And so what I mean by that is we would have students that would be at a location and their services would be around the average number that Mr. Brenton talked about. Those couple students, forgive me, either have left the district or have come back to our district at a cost saving. However, there are additional students that are out that are higher cost students to us as a district, meaning that their needs are pretty great, and so that's why that number has gone up there.
Okay. And that one and Learn, only because that's a 25, because it says in parentheses with 3% rate increase.
Yeah,
And they
so
both.
the 3% rate increase
Okay.
is the general increase of like My annual tuition cost is $70,000. Most of the rest have a 2 to 3% rate increase every year, typically.
Okay,
The reason why that is more in those two areas is because the needs of 1, 2, or 3 children is
It's
significantly
higher.
greater. So it's not a rate increase, it's the service need of a child, where we had one child that left us that cost us $70,000. A child that came in now costs us $120,000.
okay.
So that could really be just one child costing that much more.
Yep.
But the rate increase is standard across all the tuitions for the child.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question of the board or the superintendent? If not, then yes.
Matthew Radant, Lusa. Not so much a question, I guess, just sort of an acknowledgement of the factors we seem to be facing, and then perhaps a recommendation. But, you know, this is obviously for a lot of the factors that were shown on the presentation tonight. There's a lot of fixed costs that have been looming for a number of years, contracts being one of the primary drivers of that. But when we look at some of the other factors here, I think there's 3 main trend lines that we can look at. And unfortunately, they do seem to be kind of creating a pretty poor feedback loop for our town, in my opinion. We know that the increasing trend lines here is our budget spend on both the town and the school level. We know that's going up. We know the poverty rate is going up in town based on the free and reduced lunch data. But you could also safely assume that on the per capita income based off the last census data, if you factor inflation into it, that's a safe takeaway as well. The other trend line that we see that is very present over the same time period is student enrollment. You know, it's not a floodwater of students exiting the district, but it is a consistent trend over the last 7 to 10 years or so. And unfortunately, it does seem like our general population trend, also part of the last census data, is also trending in that southward projection as well. So maybe not necessarily a Plainfield problem per se, but a regional, a state problem, however you would like to define it. We know inflation is going up, and at some point we have to acknowledge that it has quite the compounding effect. As we're under 2 years of elevated inflation, that starts to compound upon itself. And that's also deteriorating that shrinking population in town's ability to support a budget from both sides that is still incrementally but still steadily increasing. So we've got increasing budgets, increasing poverty, and we've got a decreasing ability to support ourselves on that basis. The one flat line that we have here is from the state, which seems to be our ECS funding. Due to the Alliance District protection, I'll call it, it doesn't look like we're due to be docked those dollars anytime soon if nothing changed. But it doesn't look like it's going to be going up at all either. And I do believe that one of the reasons that it has decreased previous to our Alliance District designation has been the student decrease in enrollment. And so long as we still face that type of endemic circumstance in the district, I don't think we're seeing something that's going to change. So those are the 3 big trend lines I see, and they don't seem to be painting a favorable picture here for either what our year-over-year spend is going to be. I'm sure if we were to pass this budget this year, and perhaps we will, that we're not going to see a decrease in our spending next year based on recent history, going back about 10 years. I wouldn't say that's likely. I would still also feel like it's likely we're going to see another uptick in the poverty rate and probably a downtick in the general population. We're accelerating those trend lines in directions that we don't necessarily want them to go. So that all being said, I think it would behoove the budget process at this point, and I haven't been to too many of the meetings up to this point, so perhaps this is already in the works, but if it is done, I think it would be passed during tenuous state funding years where we go into this budget season having that red list of what we will have to look at if we need to cut in the event of a collection shortfall. If there is any reason why the economy seems to worsen and it impacts receipts, we need to have some contingency plan in place. That break glass in an emergency situation where we can either identify the cuts coming from wherever they may be, if it's going to be a proposition to go to the fund balance, whatever the course of action may be, no matter how toxic sounding that may be to certain years, I think that needs to be put into motion. I think that needs to exist going into this because unfortunately it does not seem like the economy is set for a rapid improvement over the short term course of the year. I hope I'm wrong. I think we all would hope for some robust growth, but it does not seem like a lot of these trend lines that we've successfully identified are indicative of things turning around in a hurry. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else? What's that? Yeah, you can talk really loud.
Crystal Ferrari, Plainfield. I have a question as far as
I'm sorry, what?
the gases and the buses. Is there any way we have any other vehicles, or they have any other vehicles? Because when I'm picking up my daughter from the high school, I'll see a bus that will have 1, 2, 3 children, and it seems that it's a waste to take a bus. So I don't know if it has to do with the amount of routes that we have to have, or if, because I've seen there's vans and other things like that, is there any way we can combine those routes, or are we at where we're at as far as the contracts with the different busing companies?
So I can answer that question in a few different ways. I almost, on a regular basis, I get asked questions by parents about, I saw a bus, it passed my house, there were 6 students on the bus. Are you wasting money on a bus that could be a van? So there's really 3 different answers to that. The first one is related to route. Where in the route did you see the bus? We had something involving a bus just the other day, which I won't go into, but there was 6 students on that bus because that was early in the route. By the time that bus was done, it had 36 students on the bus. Most of our buses run at a higher range. There's a few buses that don't, and some of those buses are buses that are special contract vehicles. We have a bus that travels from here down to Wyndham to the School of Arts. It starts in Plainfield with a small number of students. However, many buses like that bus actually travel to other towns who are splitting the cost with it, and as they travel south, they pick up more and more students. We have a bus that goes to Norwich Tech, which actually does a switch over in the parking lot of Big Y. We have 2 buses that gather students in the morning. They all gather down onto one bus and go to Norwich Tech. Why are we doing 2 buses at half rate for that? Well, if we don't do 2 buses at half rate for that in the town of Plainfield, the pickup for the very first student on that bus has to be at 4:35. And the mother of that, because that student would then have to travel the entire town, picking up every student that goes to Norwich Tech going south. And that number of students going to Norwich Tech is not that many. That number of students going to Norwich Tech on this list projected for next year's budget is actually only 28. So we've got 28 students going. So we could put them all on one bus, but it's not reasonable to ask a student of any age to be up at 4:30, ride a 2-hour bus down to Norwich Tech, and then come home from school and be on that bus till 6. I have one parent who was very adamant when we were looking at that wasn't something that was healthy for a child. The way our transportation works is we have a lot of joint routes. We've worked very closely with Sterling on joint routes, and they've been very good with that. It's a partnership that we've maintained for many years. And we do some joint routes as well with Killingly. Mr. Richards probably has a better idea of all the joint routes that we have because those change as students change. We also engage in contracts related to homeless students because students that are homeless but placed in the town of Plainfield may attend our school but may have a DCF placement in another community. I don't want to identify any individual students, but we do have students who have traveled to us from the shoreline. We have students at our high school right now who are placed at Plainfield High School because of families they were with right now who sleep in a shoreline community. And they come up to our schools, and sometimes those buses are DCF buses.
Are there any other contributions from the audience? None? We'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. So moved. Motion been made by Tom, seconded by John. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your time.